Welcome to another episode of Breaking Through the Cloud, a podcast dedicated to celebrating the incredible achievements of women in the tech industry. In each episode, we sit down with women at different stages in their careers to discuss important topics such as work-life balance, career transitions, and building confidence. Through these conversations, we hope to inspire and empower women in the tech industry. We believe that by sharing stories of success and offering mentorship and guidance, we can create a more diverse, equitable, and inclusive tech industry for all. Our goal is to provide actionable insights and practical tips for listeners to navigate their own career journeys. Whether you're a seasoned professional or just starting out, Breaking Through the Cloud is something for everyone, and we hope you will continue with us. I am so excited to welcome our guest today, who is just an incredible person and even a more incredible professional. We're welcoming Rosie Seth today. Rosie Seth has nearly 2 decades of seasoned experience in the tech industry. Armed with an honors in computer science from University of Toronto, she embarked in her career as a technical sales specialist at IBM. Over her impressive 15-year tenure, she ascended to the position of Senior Practice Manager of North America Services and Sales Delivery. After her time at IBM, Rosie joined AWS, where she has served as the head of managed services partner for Canada for the past 5 years. In her role, she spearheads the development, management, and growth of the consulting partner ecosystem. Leading a national team, she's dedicated to advancing and accelerating the adoption of cloud practices with systems integrators, solution providers, and managed service providers. Her efforts focus on driving joint go-to-market strategies and enabling customers to achieve their business objectives at scale. Beyond her very impressive professional pursuits, Rosie has generously lent her time to mentor aspiring professionals, serving on committees and boards, and seizing speaking opportunities in women's forums. Rosie's unwavering commitment to giving back has made her a welcome addition to this podcast, and we're thrilled to have her. Rosie, welcome.
Thank you, Val. What an introduction. Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here. And I love our partnership beyond this podcast, but also in our professional lives.
I could not agree more. I think it's probably one of my favorite things about the role that I have here at Kalen is just who I get to engage with and who I get to work alongside is just so many smart, impressive, driven people, and you're one of them. So I want to kick it off with really starting at the beginning. We talk a lot about how upbringing, environment, all of the things kind of form who you are in, your personal life, but also your professional life. So I'd like to know a little bit more about your trajectory and what brought you into technology, where you grew up, who made Rosie, really, at the end of the day, is where I'd like to start.
Absolutely. Yeah. I don't know if you know this, Val, but my upbringing took place in a home with 2 parents who started from scratch, multiple times, that is. My parents have a background in academia. So my father has his BSc, he has his MSc, and he's a doctorate. He was a university professor back home in India, and my mom was a teacher. So she has her Bachelor of Education. When they immigrated to Canada over 30 years ago, unfortunately, when they arrived, their degrees and accomplishments were not recognized. So imagine them, the accomplishments they had over many decades in India. They come here and all of a sudden all of that differentiation is gone, but also the merit that got them here. My mom had to re-earn her degree. My father took on a teacher assistant role at a local university. So learning about resiliency, that's where it came from. So very early in my childhood, I had to experience it day in and day out. And I swear my parents did it with ease. So they put their career aspirations aside, they put their egos aside, and they actually teamed up and started a small business. It was a dress shop. They hustled through life's challenges in making it a successful endeavor. I saw major grit in everything they did, transpired into results not only for them, but also for my sister and I. And they put us through school, and they focused our, upbringing on education and continue to allow us to see you can change course multiple times, and I'll go a bit deeper into that when I talk about how I landed at IBM and in my technology career. So my parents were great merchandisers. They took calculated risks. What we understood was, there was no shortcuts, only hard work and determination. And our lives were built around the store. I remember sharing this with my team. I grew up in the back room of my parents' shop. That was where I spent my school years. And I was thrilled. I got to eat in the food court every day. I got fries. I got poutine. There's my Canadian, Canadian flavor of this podcast. But yeah, they were in business for over 30 years, which is not easy to do in retail. And that work ethic transpired and made an incredible mark on me and who I am today. And I was taught that nothing in life comes easy. So for that reason, I'm a go-getter. I say I'm a go-getter. I'm proud to be a go-getter. And doing hard work has always just been the bar. But going into my career, if I think about that a bit, I actually wanted a contrast from the world that I had experienced, which was, entrepreneurship was great. I understood it, saw it every day. I actually wanted to be a programmer. And I started off in engineering at U of T, but I graduated, I shifted towards computer science. And it was okay. It was respected. My parents knew, they wanted an engineer. I came out as a top computer scientist. I did not end up programming. And I had an opportunity to do a professional year, which is an internship year at IBM, which, was actually in sales operations. So it was the best of both worlds. I did deviate towards a technology career, but definitely still very customer facing. So I'll pause there.
I did not know any of that. So thank you for sharing. How amazing. I have a couple of questions.
Yes.
So when you think about what it would mean to have so many different degrees and basically come over here and have to start over, that is a lot of people, I just think in this day and age, would not be able to push through that. Did you see your parents ever kind of struggle with that? Or were they just like, okay, this is what it is, and kind of went for it? Because I think that what I find now is just what you said, the resilience can be difficult for people to find, and to be able to like put their ego on a shelf and just say, okay, here's what we have to do to make it here.
Yeah. I think it was tremendously difficult for them, right?
Yeah.
Especially the fact that was the merits in which they were migrating and immigrating to Canada, right? So it differentiated them so much so that they could get that ticket to arrive. But when it was unrecognized here, imagine the setback, right? I by no means with their degrees would I say they weren't go-getters. They were. I'm pretty sure they did not demonstrate that to my sister and I.
Yeah.
We were much younger, so maybe we didn't recognize that in discussions and all of the the hustling they had to do to course correct and get back on their feet. But what we saw was when they put their mind behind, we're going to open a business, we're going to start in retail, like that was net new. Now we have a long stemming family history where my dad has siblings who have done this business, so we did have a small enough safety net to know we had connections and how to, arrive at building that as a business for my parents. But for the most part, they had to relearn everything, and they had to do it in a new environment where our traditional clothing was not the reason behind that retail venture. It was actually bridal wear. It was women's clothing. So they definitely went into unfamiliar territory.
Right.
But I think what we got to see was how many times they failed and they just got back up, right?
Yes.
Merchandising isn't easy, and retail is very seasonal. So imagine learning that for the first few years. What I remember from all of that was they were super successful. So they, my mom was a math teacher. She knows how to very profitable and manage her books, whereas my dad was very savvy with his extended family in understanding how to make connections and get to wholesalers, etc. So They did put it together. They never allowed us to see it, but it was pretty obvious that learning and failing was just, it was inevitable, and it was a continuum. You never just bet your business on one season. And we saw that. We saw that for decades, living there and then living at the store, obviously, but also working through our teenage years at the store, and seeing how savvy they were in knowing their clientele, industry trends. And it showed us a appreciation on, having that ecosystem of support,
Oh my
your
gosh.
vendors, your customers, and listening to your customers. So some of this just became innate skills that we picked up, um, in a setting in a mall. And then I'll tell you, my mom would be apologetic, saying, "I can't believe you used to do your homework in a fitting room or in the back room." And my sister and
Yeah.
I would end up fighting, and they would separate us, but we would fight for who gets the fitting room, which was much smaller, versus the back room. Or we would go work at what my parents thought was the food court, even though we were in the arcade most days. But like, from where I was sitting, this was like I was truly having the best years of my life, because no other kid, like, they needed permission. They needed to be taxied to the mall. I
Yep.
spent my whole day at the mall. So it's nice that they were able to keep the family intact. Um, but also everything that poured out of that store was skills that, even to this day, are just innate to my sister and I, and everything we do in all of our professional relationships, but personal as well. So yeah.
One of my favorite books is To Sell is Human by Daniel Pink, because I think a lot of people have this feeling about what it means to be in sales. And when you really think about any role in any industry, I mean, you have to understand your customer, understand what they need. Like, it's about seeing people, hearing them, the art of communication. And I think what you just talked about is all of those things are things that I'm sure you've taken and are applicable in all the roles I'm sure you've had. And the
100%.
resilient piece, the iterative piece is the best, specifically in technology, because it changes constantly. And what we're doing right now wasn't what we were doing even last year. So it's pretty amazing to hear that story. Thank you for sharing it. It's awesome. I want to hear a little bit about your time. You were at IBM a long time. So before we jump into your role at AWS, I'd love to know, like, you started there. Why did you stay for 14 years? Because that's a long time. And I'm sure there was a reason why. And what was that experience like?
Yeah, absolutely. So, wow, I learned so much from IBM, as anyone does in their first, early career. I was an out of school grad. What actually got me into IBM was my internship at school. So my third year, great program where I got to spend 16 months at IBM. Now, there was a pairing that needed to happen to make that happen. So I had to select the top three job postings that were available to students. And then the organization also had to pair and select their top three. And when you have a hit, that's when you get an interview. So lucky for me, IBM was my top, and they paired well with me. I think my resume spoke volumes in terms of my customer experience. I was in computer science. I did well for math, and I actually had a competing class that was going for more technical roles. So imagine if you have the sales operations role, like I am undercutting my ability, but I will say I think there was less of my class and other computer science universities that had students competing for the sales operations role. So I keep telling my dad that, and he's like, no, look, the pairing happened on both sides. So I absolutely believe that entry, that 16 months opened up my eyes. And what happened in that 16 months was every 4 months I was moving into a different function. So I'm very privileged to have had that opportunity. Not everyone gets these type of opportunities. And I went from, spending time with marketing. Definitely sales operation was across the entire time, but I also got to experience tech sales. Our marketing team helped me understand, prospecting and lead generation. And then I got to spend some time in lab services where I saw the professional work on the other side of our statements of work. So that experience helped highlight where I actually wanted to spend my time, which was in technical sales. When I went through the orientation during that time, our VP of software group at that time had an inspiring talk. And that talk was rooted, like one item that stuck out and stayed with me for a very, very long time. And now it's just common practice is the importance of making time to write really good business cases. And he was very inspiring. He was a longtime IBMer, and he was the VP of software group. So I was so inspired that at the end of my 16-month internship, I took his template that he had shared with us, and I wrote a business case to hire me back. And I took it right to his desk. We spent a few times conversing over it, correcting it even during our coffee breaks. And he said, for sure, you're going to get a job back. And he was very impressed. And that's what got me back into IBM. And he honored my ask of, I enjoyed the technical sales part. I loved demonstrating customer value through demos and proof of concepts and proof of technology. So I spent a lot of time embedding that into my value prop for him because I experienced it. I was comfortable with it. And because he had taught us the good framework of a business case, there was a ton of ROI in there that was tied directly to hiring me versus the next person. So that actually landed me my first out of school job at IBM, which was in technical sales. I did that for a good enough stretch. And I think I was really good at it. And I spent time again, they put me in retail for all the right reasons, which makes a lot of sense. And then I was promoted in role. So just leveling up in the role. I got mentees and new hires that I coached for the same role. I moved into the insurance sector. So now I was getting exposure to what I knew really well, retail, to a new industry. And I felt like IBM is that global institution where you can find every possible job available on the planet. So any technology you want to learn, any sector, public sector, commercial, but every industry and vertical across the globe. So if I wanted to be a telecom expert or procurement expert or a technologist or even a distinguished engineer, the world was my oyster. So that's why I felt like in hindsight, I did spend a long time there, but I often found every year I was learning a new job. I was learning it because it had a different lens on it, different industry lens, different customer lens. And I took a promotion after tech sales, and I did a role in lab services where I spent time as a client partner. I got a new territory. So I had a national coverage in that role, but I also got the Caribbean territory, which was a fun early career. And I did exceptionally well growing the business from a services perspective, which was new to me. And then a unique situation occurred, a rare case when I had returned from my maternity leave, where I was sought out to lead the delivery organization. So now I was moving from client partner to actually leading the practice. It was a dual role. I had pre-sales architects, I had delivery consultants. Sadly, at that time, it was all male dominated.
Yeah.
So I experienced a ton of, am I ready for this? Can I do this? I was of a shorter tenure at IBM, but also I felt like what was eating away at my own confidence was, am I the youngest one here? And I'm leading this very tenured team. But it was a promotion. It came with the challenges. I doubt myself, but I was getting a promotion, a real big, large responsibility. And I had the most fun doing that job. I embarked on my transition to management. I learned how to change my mindset. I was that go-getter, always wanted my hands on everything. And I had to learn to scale through others. I had to learn delegation. I had to, I realized a little too late when I wasn't setting a clear vision. So all of those learnings came from that time. And I think I grew the most in that, that role. most definitely. But there came a time when I started to believe like the IBM like piece of my role I could do in my sleep. I had a network of resources. I could navigate most challenges very easily with a customer or internally, except when I got this very big mandate to now pivot the entire delivery org to the cloud. So now we were changing all of our offerings. This is not going very far back. I've been at AWS 5 years, so you know exactly the time. We had an acquisition, we had a cloud mandate, and I had never built a new go-to-market. So we were really good at selling what we were good at. We were optimizing those offerings, and we were winning a lot of business. But now we had to re-architect our entire team, reskill the whole team. And that's when I realized now, wow, what a great challenge. I can't just rely on doing my job in this fashion where I just knew how to get through every challenge. So what I did at that time, Val, you're going to laugh, is I Googled the AWS Cloud Adoption Framework. And I found as I read more and more, it was available. It was generally like publicly available to everyone. So my team read it. And I found myself getting deeper and deeper into it. So I was hungry to learn, hungry to read more. I even opened a free tier account. I downloaded white papers, and my husband's like, I can't get you to stop reading. And what I learned from that, just that, couple weeks of experience, was how much it had piqued my curiosity. And I was hooked not only to the technology and the transformation we all were going to undergo for our organizations and our customers, but I realized I hadn't learned for a long time. And I had a choice to make. Either I take a page from the book that I was reading, rewrite it at IBM, or I just insert a new page and come to Amazon, where I get to just learn from other leaders who have already acknowledged and understood that transformation was necessary. So the rest was history. I applied online. I got the interview. And what really got me was not just the fact that the technology and the platform and the approach was great, but the amount of time I spent on their leadership principles and their day one culture, and learning everything that was on LinkedIn available through groups and their website. I was deeply customer first, customer centric even, but Amazon's approach to that, and as I got deeper into it, I really understood it wasn't just making the customer happy or doing what the customer wants us to do. If they don't want to spend, we don't spend. No, it was really to enrich the customer in having the data and understanding the needs that they didn't have, the needs that they didn't articulate well. And if it was truly top of mind for them, attacking that together. So the customer obsession piece and the approach we take to our day one culture, which is functioning like a startup, innovating on their behalf. That's where I truly felt like it wasn't about just making customers happy. It was doing right by the customer, even when they didn't fully see that, and helping them cross into that realm where you could have meaningful partnership conversations to help them with their transformation or their business problem. And that's the piece I think I spent the most time on when I truly believed this organization was different. I researched them. I went through the interview process, and that was very long, by the way. It is for good reason, but I think I had never been so excited through that entire process. And I haven't looked back. It's been 5 years.
That's amazing. I want to know, because I heard a couple of things that I wrote down. Like it sounded to me like you did get to the point where you were very clearly like you had hit a ceiling of what you saw as your development at IBM and your ability to grow and to learn. And what I've learned through doing this podcast is a lot of people, like that's what causes people to leave organizations, is when they feel as though they aren't able to grow or develop or learn or expand in the way that they believe that they can. Even if in that moment they don't know that's exactly why, but looking back, were you scared to leave? It does not sound like to me that you were at
Yeah.
all, but I think a lot of people who are at a company for a long time, like there's always an element of like, can I do this again, have the same level of success at a new place? It can be really scary.
Yeah. So stepping back to that, how I felt in at IBM was I
Yeah.
actually I think I was in that role also 2.5 years in leadership when I realized what I was mandated, why I was brought in. Remember, I was tapped on the shoulder
Yeah.
saying, "We think we need you on this side of the equation,"
Yeah.
not pre-selling because you've grown the business. We actually have to deliver on everything you're promising to your customer. And our organization at that time was not customer obsessed in any which way. We were
Got it.
contractual obligations obsessed, right? So what's in scope, what's not. And the approach, like any project, you're not gonna hit all of your deliverables on time, in budget, scope changes even. So we were in lab services. We would do extended retainers as well. So these are not very, you're in and out. These were project-oriented, deliverable-based projects. And what I spent the most time understanding was how do we build contracts that we would take more risk and allow the customer more flexibility. We were not an organization that wanted to do fixed price as most vendors. Like we want to help enable the customer to adopt new technologies, but we are not a consulting arm that wants to stay beyond that adoption. And that's where partners come in, even for that vendor. But what we weren't doing really well was handling when we did have customer escalations. And I felt like my job was complete when I had taught that organization on an escalation is not a bad thing. The customer is actually speaking to us more transparently and telling us where we need to fix things so that they can get the outcome they had desired. And that sometimes isn't as black and white as deliverables. It is the partnership in which we operate. Their desired outcome through that process was very different. So we needed to lean in. We needed to learn to listen before we solve. And some of that patience I had, and from my pre-sales experience, that the delivery team may not have been focused on it. But that was my mandate. That's like the value I was supposed to provide is catch those, learn from it. Let's change our processes and culture. And I feel like even the cloud, when we had to move to the cloud, go to market and re-platform and rebuild our managed services, that was the second part of the task that was inevitable once I was in role. But the job that I was given, I felt like I had completed it. So there was this sense of I was tasked to do this. We're winning business again. We have brought down escalations. Customers are loving us. We're expanding our business in existing accounts. All of the trailing indications were very positive, and our leading indications were now changing because we were going to move towards reoccurring revenue and had to create new offerings. So I felt like when I did make the decision to start researching and thinking about, do I really want to do the next part of this task and challenge that's upon me here or elsewhere, I really truly felt I had closed one chapter of the job I had taken. So it made it easier.
Yeah. Okay.
But yeah, definitely when I pivoted and started to research it, the desire was much higher because it was truly, everything was tied up in a nice bow for what I wanted to accomplish.
Well, I love that. I think before we get into kind of the part that we like to talk about, actual like practical tips and real examples for our audience, I want to know a little bit more. You talked about going through the AWS loop in the interview process. You've been there 5 years, so I'd love for you to give just some context around the role and how it's even potentially changed for you over the 5 years, whether in scope, but also as a company. I mean, the growth that AWS has experienced to be 80 plus, billion-dollar business, and just seeing that arc over time has been insane for those people like me who worked alongside you all. But I think we'd love to hear from your perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. So 5 years at Amazon. I actually had my anniversary over the summer. I'm a yellow badger now. Um,
Congrats.
Thank you. All that means is I speak in leadership principles all the time. My team, I think you summarized it really well. My team's responsibility is to empower our Canadian partner ecosystem, and that's partners that are active north of the border in Canada, but it doesn't restrict the type of partners we have globally that also spend time with us. I have a very dynamic team. We have a diverse set of partners, coast to coast, all shapes and sizes. We cover consulting partners, solution providers, managed services partners, and we work even with our ISV and marketplace partners. As actually, this is part of that second question you asked me. Is like we're finding our partners are now partnering with other partners over the last few years because we have this we have reached that inflection point where customers expect that to happen, especially with platforms like AWS Marketplace that is being adopted by our customers, but also our partners. And we're seeing these new synergies, especially in the last 2.5 years, I would say, between our systems integrators, but our channel partners as well with our ISV ecosystem of partners. So we take great pride in helping our partners transform their businesses, helping them develop the business case to stand up a cloud practice on AWS. And we support our partners through, enablement, technical and sales. We help them bring new offerings to market for customers, and we help them co-sell with us, with our organizations to reach more customers and reach our customers jointly. Um, Now, the changes over the last 5 years that I've seen, this is a very big question. The ones that I'm most proud of are the two new leadership principles that were added. So everything we do is rooted in our leadership principles. We added two additional ones. We have 16 now. One was strive to be Earth's best employer. And then the second one is success and scale brings us broader responsibility. So there is because I mentioned our day one culture, which is super specific on working backwards from our customers and obsessing over their needs. Now, with our new leadership principles, we have put enough focus, even though it existed before, but publicly and very proudly, even internally, greater focus on our employees' development and growth. And our commitment to our community. So, Amazon co-founded the Climate Pledge, and we have a commitment to be net zero carbon across our business by 2040, which is 10 years ahead of the Paris Agreement. So many of the values that we've always had internally are now very clear in these two leadership principles. That's the ones I love in terms of the changes in the recent time. A major shift that I personally observed is the exponential growth in the number of partners that are active, at least in North America. Obviously, I'm closer to the Canadian business. And that's really because our partners are in the forefront of everything that Amazon and AWS does. And scaling through our partner has become a key pillar to our business strategy. And that's helping us show up with our partners in everything we do. So, an example would be, generative AI and industry solutions. Our partners are actually leading the charge and taking our new services and features and developing solutions on behalf of our customers who seek specialized use case solutions. I've also seen that our obsession about gaining customer and partner feedback still guides where we take our platform and services and innovation, but also improving our processes internally. There's a huge focus on seamless partnering experience. A good example, as I shared, was as we see the adoption of AWS Marketplace, that's all been our features, and how we expect innovation to happen on that platform is guided by feedback from our systems integrators and consulting partners, but also our ISV partner ecosystem and what customers are asking for. So many things, although We've seen great growth in business and adoption. Many things are still very rooted in our culture, and we continue to use that as the leapfrog into the next generation of our services and platform offerings. Um,
I think the leadership principles from at least a partner perspective and an outsider looking in are so helpful. A framework for decision making, a framework to your point, keep everybody honest about the decisions, because small things add up. And if you are not thoughtful about how those leadership principles show up in something minute and how that impacts something even potentially greater, I think you can lose the culture and the drive and the growth. I mean, I'm a believer of only the paranoid survive. And while that can
right.
sound scary, I do think you have to have a level of anxiety about what are we missing. But I think the leadership principles give you that framework to question, to think big.
100%.
Yeah.
And it's weaved, it's front and center in everything we do internally now. If you, I know, Val, you've been around us long enough to know, our mental model is as we do any planning, as we develop new processes or services and solutions, we always leave an empty chair in a meeting room, which is the customer's chair. If the customer was in the room, how would we act? What would the customer say? And it's the voice of the customer. Now imagine all of that also translating to, are we bettering our the earth? Are we looking at sustainable practices? The same thing with our builders. If there's a chair in the room, it's our builder. Are we providing the best employee experience? Are we providing growth? Are we giving equal opportunity? Are we looking at this from a diverse force perspective? So although it occurs, this makes it front and center, which is as equal as customer obsession. And I think it's translating into better solutions for all of us as consumers, as well as, good vendors to our partners and to our customers. So 100%, I feel like it's weaved into everything. It does not go unnoticed.
I could not agree more. So I want to you've talked about just your career and your experience, and you've been so successful, and you're clearly very intelligent, thoughtful, and analytical, and all of the things. But I think I go back to the old saying of it's not what you know, it's who you know. And I'm curious about the support systems and networks that have been instrumental in your professional growth and development as a professional, a woman in technology. Like I'd love to hear about that.
It's surprising when I reflect on that in this in hindsight. I would say champions. 100%, I've had champions. Did I know they were my champions as things were unfolding for me? 100%. I never had. I've never been good at prioritizing time with my mentors. I've always identified mentors, some very vocally, some very formally, informally, but I don't think I've prioritized being mentored personally. I think, or I believe I should know what that exit criteria is, and I'm just hard on myself. But I have to say, I learned the hard way. So what I've realized is if I reflect on all of the big wins that I've had, either professionally or personally or just in between, there's always been a champion. And sometimes that champion has been a known individual, or, when you reflect, you realize there was this individual who made it happen for you. And I actually value my present day mentors much more because now I have that base of knowledge that I didn't have early in my career. So a lot of my champions have become my mentors when it should have been the other way around. So I feel like I was doing it wrong until I saw what good looks like. So what I would say is now that I know they existed, I make time to be very prepared to being mentored. And I say usually when I get approached to mentor someone else, I ask them, the questions to poke at, are you getting organized behind what you want to achieve with this one individual or two or three? My tip is I actually create a value chart. And the value chart is not very precise. It's here's what my professional landscape looks like, the skills I know I need to develop, the skills I don't have today. And I actually show that to my mentors, the ones I'm comfortable with, and saying, what have I missed? You might be someone with a lot more tenure, or you're an individual who's in a business area that I desire to learn more about. What am I missing in my chart? And that goes to make for a very, very, it's an icebreaker almost, right? They get to understand how you're thinking about it. They get to understand your perspective on your own self-awareness of where you are in your career. And it's not easy to do. But what I've learned is it does not have to be perfect. Half the time, the boxes were empty. And I was able to spend enough time with individuals to now have a full chart. And what that does is it puts a box of many different things I want to learn. Some things are very tactical. Other things are very strategic. And I will tell you 50% of the boxes are usually without a name because I haven't found the mentor. But the ones that have been successfully filled, I focus there. I prepare for those discussions. I have an exit criteria, and it's very known to the mentor. So I use their time well. I use, I let them know sometimes I just want to ideate. Your role for now in this relationship is to help me ideate. And I remember having one mentor who helped me get to this framework was she's like, Rosie, you keep talking yourself out of really good opportunities because you're so fixated on doing the opportunity, not seeing the potential it's going to have for your future growth. And she said it more eloquently and explained why sometimes may not fit in all the work we have to do. And it may look like a stretch assignment. It might be even disguised as your next career opportunity. But it was very hard for me to see how that could be a stepping stone for a skill that I may need in the future. So some of my mentors who are, have this great wisdom, are very tenured, will provide that foresight that may not exist for me today. While my mentees spend more time reverse mentoring me, telling me how to be a better mentor because there's many things that are needed today for early career that weren't a challenge for me because I had that grit mindset. So now I find my mentees are actually helping me grow and pivot towards learning from them versus coming to the equation to provide mentoring. I think I leave with a lot to learn and how to change my approach as well. So I think the only other thing I would say on this topic is it's still very hard for me to distinguish, who would be my champion. But I think good mentoring would eventually lead to having a subset of champions that are working on your behalf. And the only major learning from having, 15 real mentors that I formalized my relationship with over the years is it's not a lifelong commitment. I find like when you try to match yourself with a mentor, you're also trying to find a good friend or someone who's going to make you feel good. And once I took that away from the equation and said, your purpose here is to help me build a skill. Your purpose is to help me vet good future opportunities. I realized they don't have to be your mentors for life. And it's okay to walk away from mentoring, but closing that, saying, I was super successful for this, even though it may be a few months of mentoring that got you to the outcome you arrived at. So it's okay to do that. It's okay to set expectations. But I find like for the longest time, I was trying to find friends for life, mentors for life. And that's why it wasn't working. We were trying to cover way too much ground, and it was not going to afford me what I actually required at the time.
I love that. First off, I think that framework is so helpful because often if I'm approached to mentor someone, I think having some context of here's where I am, here's what I perceive my gaps, my strengths, and tactically what I want to learn and the questions I want to ask would be beyond helpful. That's not often what happens. And I think you've just provided a framework to make the most from both sides. So that's amazing. I want to kind of switch gears for a minute. We talk about this with almost every guest on this podcast because I think it's important and can be tricky to navigate. Be curious about encountering biases in your career or discrimination and navigating those. You mentioned a little bit earlier that you took over a team that was predominantly men. I think there are a lot of people that tune into this podcast that could be in a situation. Just knowing how to handle those things professionally and with grace is important.
Yeah, I think there's definitely many. I think some of it is my own biases that hampered my own confidence.
Wow.
I don't think I would have said that, 10 years ago. But I'll give you a few examples. So when I had the desire to grow my family, I got married. We knew we wanted to have children. I got pregnant. My first maternity leave, we cut it short. I felt like I needed to cut it short. And in Canada at the time, in Ontario, we could have a maternity leave that was shared for up to 12 months. So, first time mom, would have loved to stay, but I actually felt like I got it in my head that, my job may not be there. I wouldn't be taken seriously. And I went back too early. I was physically and mentally not able to. I shared this with many folks now is like, even when I transitioned back, I was traveling with my baby. My mom was, cutting an airline ticket and joining me. Should it have been that way? It worked for our family, but I didn't realize it didn't have to be that way. So I took it upon myself to fix how I perceived I needed to be seen. And then the same goes for, a person of color. Oftentimes when I meet new customers or vendors or partners or anyone who doesn't know me closely is like, oh, you're from India, you were born there, your English isn't bad. Where are you from? Right? It bothers you too. Like it bothered me quite a bit. And how do you reestablish credibility over and over again when that's the icebreaker? It shouldn't be that. But I've been here for over 30 years. When I first came, I experienced it in school. I experienced it in high school and university and my first job. And, throughout my career, every time I have to go and reestablish credibility with new clients, etc. It comes playfully at times. Sometimes it was very direct. So it got to becoming a normal and question and answer for me where it shouldn't have been. So I think a lot of these, I guess, bias and discrimination existed in my head, and it held me back for a long time because I would anticipate these type of questions, or I would anticipate my thought process, and that was what was occupying my headspace versus being the best I can be, right, regardless of that. And I think a lot of it had to do with the fact that I had this very strong female figures, I would say, because the history on my mom, like when you have that at home and you have a sister who also experienced the same upbringing, you just let that off to the side. You take it in stride and you push through it like any other challenge. So I have to say, dealing with all of that was very much rooted in everything I did, just showing up somewhere. So when you experienced other forms of discrimination where honestly, I have to say I took the job when I had 12 male consultants under me in that practice lead job. I had one female peer leader only. The rest were all male. My leadership was all male. I was in a good place because they didn't actually... I didn't experience it. I think IBM was a very welcoming organization that had great practices and training. But not everyone has that. Like I was privileged to be amongst great leaders. I had that champion of a leader who put me in a big job. But it was my own head because all of that encounters elsewhere or even with customers, I was feeding myself the wrong food in my head. in situations. So my own confidence was, it was killed at the door. And so now when I do encounter challenges, I treat them all the same. So one of the tactics is, put biases and discrimination aside. Any challenge that comes my way, I don't label it as a setback or a shortfall or, and I'll give you an example. So if I'm in a room and someone has a great idea that I thought about doing but didn't do, and it comes across as their idea is something I didn't consider, and my solution was lacking that, the first thing I'm going to think to myself is not, oh, how did I miss that? Oh, stupid me. No, I'm going to say, I'm going to ask myself a question. What tools and resources did this person have available to them in order to get that idea or data? And how do I better myself? So the minute I question myself, it allows me to grow and think about, if it really bothered me, I need to learn something new. And therefore, I'm not going to act on feeling dumb at times when I do, but rather I'm going to start solving in my head on, oh, that's a great idea. I am going to go do something about learning how that came about and really action it with curiosity. And I feel like that's because all of the other times in my head, I was doubting myself rather than just allowing it to go push at the very side of my head or release it out of my head, that no one's like, have good intention. Think about it. Think about every situation from being curious. And some of that is just helps me cope in my head about not feeling like I'm doing it to myself or labeling myself. And a large part of that, again, is that upbringing where you are smart, you are analytical, you can overcome challenges. Well, no, I don't have to. I can fail and just dust myself off and try again. So I think I'm in a far better place now. But for a very long time, I was living under the whole, you got to be perfect, you got to be great. Any challenge is something you can charge through. So, yeah.
That's amazing. I know. I will just say, I was lost thinking about how many things you can course correct by just keeping your own internal thought process from a place of positive intent and curiosity and learning before you're making judgments, assumptions, actions. So I think that is so powerful. And the idea that your own biases and potentially viewpoints on yourself were probably the most destructive at times is like so fascinating, because I would probably think similarly, candidly. Like, outward discrimination for me has been few and far between. I don't come from the same background or experience as you, but I loved what you said, because also I think it gives anybody listening something that they can immediately adjust, of just taking a step back.
Yeah, and Val, I would say that's step one. There's other encounters where you just need to build backbone, right? Like if you Amazon talk, it's like, one is don't stop at the door, because that the tactic I just shared is just don't do this to yourself, where the situation just allows you to be the one who has to fix it. When you feel passionate, you have to exercise and build this muscle on having backbone. I've done my research. I've done this. How did I miss this? And build a safety net with the folks around you, that it's okay to think out loud and solve with others. And I feel like that is not easy to do. That takes practice. Again, I feel like I'm in a place of privilege at Amazon where that's actually valued, right?
Yes.
You can demonstrate backbone, but to do it effectively, you should have real confidence in the place of data that you're coming to the conversation with, and then be okay to disagree, commit if you're shown another route, and then commit wholly to understanding where you were wrong, reassess your data, come back and recycle through that, right? So that's not something that's innate. I feel like our organization does allow us to build that muscle over and over again in a very safe zone. But yeah, I think most women, even when I talk to my mentors, is like, we thrive if given that environment. I think what we do is we stop at the door, which was like your own had. If we can overcome that and participate, I think in any environment, standing your ground with having good data allows for a very great conversation.
Oh, I could not agree more. I love your perspective. So I've two more questions before we wrap up. I want to understand a little bit more about how you balance demands of personal and professional. You already shared you have taken maternity leaves and maybe not, taken as much time as you might maybe needed. I personally am not a balanced individual, and I've just come to accept that and kind of reframe it in my head of what balance means to me. I'm curious about how you do it, what it means to you, specific strategies you use and
No,
employ.
thanks for yeah. I was actually asked this question at a recent talk we did on vulnerability and leadership, and someone actually said, how do you balance it? And I'm like, I don't. Then I don't strive to. I would say that would be a lie. You can change balance, you can change harmony, whatever. To each their own. I'm blessed. I do have to say, what's working for me is I have a very supportive husband, and I have two sets of retired parents that live in a very short distance where we reside. So I know most folks don't have a support system like that, and I'm very grateful. But it was by design. We chose to have this because there's many things we aspire to do, but we didn't want to forego all of the great stuff of our childhood. And between my husband and I, we have been around extended families, siblings. So although it's difficult on most days, we do have the safety net rely.
Yeah, support. Yes.
My mom would say, I ring the doorbell, I leave my kids on the lawn sometimes saying, I gotta go, and there's no questions asked. The kids love being there. But I would say that, I make it sound easy. It's not that easy. I mean, we're very present in our children's lives. And that means sometimes our work does have to be second. Although, I don't always make it appear that way, but it is, you have to be ruthless in prioritization. We're in an environment, at least in tech, things move fast. You can't be on top of everything. And I think we, at least myself, I try to be good at everything I do, and something's got to give. So it's that hierarchy. You got to decide where can you come back and pick up, whereas what is critical. And honestly, I do try to trump my children and all of the activities that they have in their lives. Like we signed them up because we didn't have it when we were growing up. Our children couldn't give us that. Our parents couldn't give us that. So it wasn't just to keep them, occupied, or we really strive to give them opportunities that we believe it's going to make them very, whole children, and things they desire to do, right? And if they want to change and try something else, we look at that as a family and we subscribe to it, but we make a commitment together. And that means being present while those activities take place. So my team will tell you there's oftentimes, I do talk about all of the activities I have with my children, how I make trade-offs, because I want them to do the same, right? We do work hard, but some things are just nothing you can revert back to and regain, after a few years when they're older. So the 2 or 3 tactics that I did use that helped me through my day, I do want to share that. So one is I have this, I call it earning it. So because we do so many tasks in a day and everything seems urgent and critical, I try to do 3 activities, and I do one that is taking up my headspace that might not be, work related. So not only is this something, weekends and evenings, even during the day, I found more sanity in my work where it's like, I have to pick up something from the grocery store. So if I do 1, 2, or 3, whatever items I put for the day, I earn that time to go and do something that's occupying my headspace, because if it's at the back of my head, it's not allowing me to do the other things effectively. So I do try to say, after I do these two things, I'm going to reward myself, squeeze in something personal, and then go at it that way. The second thing I learned that's really worked well for our entire family dynamic is a transition between, and we did this in the COVID time when it was hard to transition the entire family because everyone's working and doing things at different timings. So we go for a family walk at the end of the day. Mostly my husband and my kids do opt out, but that time is like no phones. It's a full, we'll do a 5-kilometer walk, and it transitions us to the evening where you don't feel that desire to recount all of the other things that are on your list for work, which can wait till the next day. And then the last is the one I mentioned, is like being accountable for what you commit to. So with my children, early on, I realized I committed to being at every soccer game or swim meet, but I wasn't living up to my word and the commitments to the children. So we make those commitments together, and they hold me accountable without any guilt. So it doesn't always work out, but I think everyone understanding that you're trying your best and having that conversation with the children really allows them to give me a hall pass when I need it. But it does mean that I actually choose what I said I would do first on most occasions. But again, many different tactics ahead of that before we found something that works.
I love that. I struggled massively with being able to like move through from work into mom, wife, after being on, 15 different Zoom meetings and coming downstairs. And I think that is just real of like, it is. You are going, I used to have a commute. I used to be able to be
100%
in a
same.
or I was traveling every other week. I used to have that time to make the shift. And when that was removed, we all had to think about like, okay, how do we do this? For me, I should be taking a walk. I just put on comfy clothes.
That works too. That works too. We've tried many things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I love it. That's so helpful. I think, like I said, we've really tried to use this platform to get real world, like try this, because I think some of it is testing and experimenting of what works. And you're like, okay, that didn't work. Let me try something else. Iterating, if you will. My last question before we wrap up is a question I like to ask everybody. If you could travel back in time and give a piece of advice, one nugget of wisdom to 22-year-old Rosie, what would that be and why?
Yeah, I have to say, I think I would tell myself every scenario doesn't need 100% of me, which, is the analytical mean, the precision a decision requires, or the energy. I think what I've learned over the years is this mental model that even Amazon has is one-way or two-way door decisions, right? Like one way is you go in, you can't come back out. Like it's going to impact something that can't be undone. Whereas a two-way door decision is like you go in through one door and you can come back. And you might be wrong, you might be right, but nothing breaks if you're wrong. And I feel like if I had to recollect everything that I've focused or over-focused my time and energy on in past, most of the decisions were two-way door decisions. It's just they were all perceived as one-way door decisions because I had this desire to be perfect in analytical. And analytical, I mean, like I would double check my work when we all knew it was accurate. Did it even need any analytics to make a decision? No, half the times it didn't. So I find I used to wander into too much before making a decision. And now, now this is something that builds over time. Going with your gut sometimes is fine. You're going to have a happier life, Rosie, if you stress less about how the decision's made, but rather making the decision and just using a model such as this, right? What's the worst that could happen if I make this decision quickly? And I think that would have freed myself to more experiences. I think making some of the toughest decisions in my life would have been more enjoyable, even the stressful ones. So I think I do a lot more of that now. And it's just like, go with the flow. But realizing that many things are not going to break the world or your family or the security of your family. So it's okay to go faster at times and absorb your time to the things that truly matter.
Love
So
that.
yeah.
Rosie, thank you so much for your transparency, your ability to actually give tactical examples. I think you shared a lot of wisdom. I'm going to go back and listen to this, which for me is always a challenge, just hearing my own voice. But this was amazing. I learned more about you, and I've taken a lot away from today. So I'm so grateful. I know how busy you are. And like you said, ruthless prioritization. And I'm grateful that this made it on the list.
100%. Yes. Thank you so much, Val. I continue to learn a lot from you. And thank you for putting these series together. I do spend time listening to many of them on different devices, but continue to lead the charge, and looking forward to hearing your voice and mine when we replay this. Thank you so much. Have a great rest of your week.
Thanks so much. If you enjoyed the show, please leave us a rating and review on the platform you're listening on, and please don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. If you have any feedback or suggestions for future episodes, we'd love to hear from you. You can reach us at podcast@caelent.com, and you can find the email address in the description below. Thank you again, and we'll see you next time.